For some reason, one word stuck in my head when you mentioned that Dave would be an interesting guest. The word agnostic stuck in my head, and
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing else.
Well, remember, and if you ever want to hear a little bit about microbiology or any of that, that's area of specialty. So he'll dive into that too. But I'm sure we'll get there. I don't have any doubt. So
it's funny. I don't know. You haven't had a chance to read the intro that I wrote.
I scanned it really fast.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it really is. Agnostics will always ask well, in my notes, I refer to the fact that, how did I put this? In the back of my mind, agnostics are always the ones shaking their heads and shrugging at me and my atheistic certainty. my certainty about uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, that is really what this comes down to. It's another question about another view of certainty versus uncertainty. This is the uncertainty versus uncertainty point of view.
Yeah. And I'm interested to hear more about why he chose agnosticism, like what that journey was as well, because that's one of the things that always intrigues me about folks that are agnostic too, is what's got you kind of, from another point of view, kind of in between the two. What made you say that's the place you want to locate yourself?
Here's I'm gonna stick a marker down. All right, I'm gonna stick a marker down that he would not say that he chose agnosticism.
Yeah.
He had no choice.
Okay, interesting. Okay. That'll be interesting to see. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So
all right.
And here's our pre-show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 35 of the Faitheism Project podcast. My name is Alan Katz, and I have always been grateful to Hebrew School for making me the atheist I am today.
And I am Randy Lovejoy, a pastor without a church, which allows me to do all sorts of fun things online, including being involved in this podcast and today's conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
Today we are talking about the Zen of Agnosticism. Now, from a religious point of view, agnostics, from a religious point of view, agnostics are no better than atheists. Now, from an atheist point of view, agnostics are kind of wishy-washy. And both of us have it all wrong about agnostics, as we're about to learn. If you stop to think about it, and that's exactly what we're going to do, agnostics are the most honest people among us when it comes to thinking, because they're simply asking one question. Can you prove it? If you can't prove it, we can't say it's entirely true. Well, today we have a guest, a guy named Dave Wurtlieb, and Dave is he's going to tell us about his journey. He describes himself as an agnostic Jew. He is he'll tell his story, but he was a teacher of biology, microbiology. Thank you, at a community college outside of San Diego for 34 years. Mm-hmm. 25 of those he ran the biology department, chaired it. So this guy's done a lot of thinking.
Well, and I have to throw this in. He I'm kind of shaking my family tree right now for the whole podcast deal. He actually is the father of a woman who is my sister-in-law. And so one of the reasons I was excited—
Full transparency here.
That's right. And one of the reasons I wanted to get him on this podcast is that we've had amazing conversations at some family gatherings, Thanksgiving, yes, even Christmas, some different gatherings. And our conversations have just been wonderful, I think, for both of us. And
it is an important footnote as to why Dave is our guest today.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that he's an agnostic suddenly made it a great topic for conversation. It all started with conversations that you, Randy, had with Dave. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, it's the notion that we can reach across these divides really without even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, without any further ado, why don't we bring Dave into the conversation?
Let's do it.
His,
Let's do it.
us sitting here talking about the poor guy.
Welcome, Dave. Thank you for waiting in the green room for us. We're excited to have you here.
How are the refreshments?
Not bad.
Oh, good. We just had the machine refilled.
Oh, good. It tasted fresh. Yes.
So, Randy was described a little bit about how you came to us.
Okay.
The familial connection that brought you into contact with Randy and.
I was trying to think of when we first met, but I mean, would it have been at the wedding or?
I don't remember if it was before the wedding.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Yeah.
But,
what kind of wedding was it?
What kind of wedding are you talking about? There were, it's been a long time.
The wedding Randy was referring to.
Quite a long time.
That's right. That's right.
It's been 20 years.
Yeah. His daughter and my brother-in-law were married. And where was it? It was out. Where was the location?
At the Golden's house out in near Santa Rosa, not Santa Rosa. I'm blanking.
Near
north of
San
LA.
Diego.
North of LA.
Okay.
In Ventura, the edge of Ventura County.
And
Simi Valley, Moore Park, Simi Valley, that area.
Sure.
And Walter, a previous guest, officiated at the wedding. So that's
he
right.
officiated at the wedding. He was honored to be asked by his son and future daughter-in-law to perform the ceremony. He was very honored to do that.
Yeah.
It was an amazing experience. Actually, I thought so.
And since then, we've had many times at different kind of gatherings of family. And Dave's known for his mashed potatoes, among other things. The garlic mashed potatoes that are mind-blowingly good. And then we've just gotten to have multiple conversations over those years as well, which I've always really valued and thoroughly enjoyed.
My wife would call those talks, and she enjoyed the talks with Walter that she had.
Yes.
She said, "Oh, goody, we're going to have God talk."
See, this is so counterintuitive because we've always been, we've been taught culturally that this is a subject to avoid.
Well, we dove right in.
That's right.
We were very comfortable being together and comfortable in the knowledge of how we brought to the table our own experiences and backgrounds, and it was always a positive thing to look forward to.
And but I think there's something in what you just said. It's when one has confidence in what one brings to a conversation of differences.
Correct.
Where the point of the discussion isn't, it's not an argument.
Exactly.
There's no argument to win here. Here are my experiences. What are your experiences? That's very interesting.
Right.
And one of the things I've enjoyed as well is that Dave's invited a number of folks to some of the Shabbat. Well, what would you call the Zoom get-togethers?
Well, this was Jessica's idea, my daughter's idea.
Okay.
When COVID hit and everything shut down, because we had never done this before on a regular basis. We never celebrated the usual Shabbat thing on a Friday night before, but Jessica said, why don't we have the family get together on Zoom and just say the 3 blessings? And so we agreed. And so it was Jessica, Eric, and Ethan, my daughter, son-in-law, grandson, my other daughter who lives in Ojai, California, and a cousin from the Bay who lives in the Bay Area, cousin Charlie, who used to regularly come down for our Thanksgiving gatherings, actually. And so what we do every Friday, we chit chat for a little bit. And then we say we light the candles and say the blessing. We drink the wine and say the blessing, and we break bread, and say the blessing, and that's basically it. And then we go off and have our dinners or whatever.
Now,
it's because it's really sweet.
Yeah. Now
you maintains the connection.
You said, Dave, that prior to the pandemic, this was not something that you did. You did not observe the Sabbath on a regular basis.
Well, not in that way. I mean, what has happened is, especially with Louise, my other half, she has a very strong tie in the congregation that we belong to. Mm-hmm. And there is, it's a very big synagogue. Mm-hmm. And there is every Saturday morning at that synagogue, what I call, the synagogue is named, it's called Beth Israel. And what I call the counterculture at Beth Israel, because in addition to the big regular service, there's this really, the only nice spot on this huge campus is it's a chapel, and it's a gorgeous little structure. And there's a service called the Minion Service, meaning the gathering of 10.
Yeah, of the 10, yeah.
And it's lay-led. You can wear blue jeans if you want to. A rabbi never shows up.
Yeah, you just need 10.
Been going on for 25 years, and that's been Shabbat for her. And I join in every now and then, and it's it's something I've come to understand about what it means to be Jewish, I guess, for me. It's a community.
When you said the counterculture within a Reformed congregation, it makes me laugh because, all right, I grew up Jewish. I grew up in a conservative Jewish household congregation, and we thought the Orthodox were crazy, and we thought the Reform were Christians. So to hear that there's
which means you thought really highly. You thought really highly of the Reformed Jews. Then I take it. Is that what you meant?
Hey, I'm giving away cultural dirt here. I'm
talking now about that right now.
The whole rest of the tribe is going to have to kill me now for what I just gave away.
Yeah, you can't tell people about that. No, I'm kidding.
Our lips are sealed. Even though this is a podcast that's going to go everywhere, our lips are sealed.
That's right.
I never said this. This is one of those there's things that.
But I understand your history with that. Yes.
No, it's.
And Dave, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Bronx in New York City.
Okay.
And I grew up
Baltimore.
Okay.
East Coast, so East Coast Jews as opposed to these West Coast
Jews. So that says it all in a sense. I grew up, family was Jewish, but I was totally secular. The entire family was totally secular, never looked at the inside of a synagogue ever. Nope. However, something must have implanted because my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, the matriarch of the family, insisted. This is a totally secular, no shul, no synagogue anywhere in sight. She insisted that her 3 grandsons had to have bar mitzvahs. And she provided the talis and the other stuff, and we did, and I did.
Yeah,
and I went to a modern Orthodox synagogue in the neighborhood for 2 years to learn how to become a bar mitzvah. And honestly, the day of the bar mitzvah, I walked out of that door and never looked back because it didn't signify anything to me. But something implanted, and
but it's not a religious. All right, let me ask the thing that was implanted, because hey, I in my conservative household, we were entirely secular. Yeah, we went to the high holiday services. Yeah, we went to Friday night if there was a bat mitzvah, Saturday if there was a bar mitzvah. Otherwise, hey, but I went to Hebrew school from the age of 6 to the age of 14. I went to Hebrew school. I was absolutely indoctrinated, but not the.
Well, what was that seed? I'm kind of interested in what.
Well, was... I this is kind of what I'm getting at.
Okay.
I absolutely believe that I dropped from the womb an atheist. But I am grateful to my Hebrew school education for finalizing the deal.
For giving you the wiggle room to be able to be comfortable being Jewish and being an atheist at the same time.
But this is the thing. And this is my question, because Judaism is not just a religion. Yes, it is a religion you can practice, but when one is born into Judaism, it's not like being born into Catholicism or Protestantism. You know, Jews, hey, there's a genetic disease that we carry. Tay-Sachs.
Oh, but that's a separate matter.
Okay. Well, yes.
But you're talking to someone who taught genetics for a long time.
Yeah. But there's
be careful where you carry that.
Yes. But okay. Understood. But this is something that is within me. But that thing is a tie to my culture, because that is a lot of where my culture came from those shtetls, which is where the Tay-Sachs came from.
But understand, let's not confuse two things. I would hesitate to say it's in the genes when you're talking about being Jewish.
And I agree with you.
Thing that you learned from your parents. You grew up in a Jewish household, regardless of how secular it was, and that implanted something. That was learned. It was not inborn.
Oh,
be a little bit careful about.
Yeah. But I'm pointing out simply that this is something that in a way it binds me in a way to my culture.
That I like better.
Okay, it is something biochemical inside of me that where that came from is where I came from, and it's nothing to do with the religion and everything to do with the culture.
I agree.
That grew out of the religion, absolutely.
I totally agree with that.
But then transcended the religion, and this is the thing, and this is why. In my opinion, being an atheist, being an agnostic, these are not put one outside of being a Jew. They can't.
Totally.
They can't. And they can't even put you outside of Judaism.
Okay.
Because the nature of Judaism really says, rabbinical Judaism, which is the Judaism that flowed once the temple was destroyed by the Romans. Yeah, the rabbinical Judaism that you and I are the product of says question away.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right.
There are two things that come to mind about
Please.
me. Okay. One is I'm going to play Torah scholar now. Give me a little lead on this. Okay.
I've laid the groundwork.
Okay.
Roll.
In the Torah story, in Genesis. Jacob, Yaakov, at some point wrestles with an angel.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, he is renamed. He is given a different name. And his new name, which then appears in the rest of Genesis, off and on, they keep exchanging the names, is Yisrael, Israel. Jacob is renamed Israel. And it's a recognition, in a sense, that he's the grandson of Abraham. He is one of the patriarchs. He's the progenitor of blah, blah, blah. Okay. But what does Yaakov mean in Hebrew, literally? It means wrestles with God. And what that means is that this is part of what it means to be Jewish.
Yes.
That it's okay to question, challenge, wrestle with God, and that strengthens who you are, in a sense. And when I first read that story and heard that interpretation, I said, now there's one interesting reason why I feel comfortable being Jewish, because I always, I'm an agnostic. I call myself an agnostic. What does that mean? Whatever it means, and we can talk about that later if you want to. But
we plan to.
But it means, you know, I can challenge traditional concepts about God and still be very comfortably considered Jewish and consider myself Jewish. And there's no conflict there. It's part of the deal. And that makes me happy. But I separate from myself. I separate in terms of my development, I guess, as my latest favorite word is sentient being. I'm a sentient being.
I like that term a lot. Yeah. Okay. I like that term a lot.
It's my word of the month, sentient. Okay. I separate. You have kind of forced me to think about this very carefully as I've been thinking about this thing.
Apologies.
I separate how I became an agnostic and how I thought of myself as agnostic and how I thought of myself and think of myself as being Jewish. I mean, you've linked atheist Jew and I've linked agnostic Jew, but for me, they're actually two separate tracks. Being agnostic and why I consider myself agnostic is just something that when I was old enough to realize what the word agnostic meant, I knew that that's what I was.
Sure.
No, it had nothing to do with being Jewish.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with being Jewish at all.
It's a very ancient way of thinking. The Hindus had a word for, and it's very close to it. There's a word in Sanskrit, which there was a whole school of teaching, you know, the Hindu teaching going back thousands of years that said we cannot know.
Right. And I like that phrase that you use. And I noticed you used it when you were talking with Walter. You said, I don't know is the answer. And that's a very agnostic answer. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know. And it applies in terms of concept, thinking about God, the God concept. And it also applies, well, this is a separate podcast, maybe in the future. It also applies to science and our understanding of the natural world. I don't know. If you don't have the facts, you don't have an answer, that's fine. It's okay. I don't know is okay to say if you don't know. No, don't shy away from that. Okay. So that's agnostic. That's in one box. Now let's talk about, and stop me if I'm babbling, but let's talk about me.
That's what we do here, Dave. That's what we do.
Okay. Let's talk about my journey to becoming a Jew, being aware of being a Jew. Okay. And that didn't really happen until I became a parent. Okay. My wife and I both grew up in the Bronx. You know, we always knew we were Jewish. My wife had a little bit more experience with affiliation through her parents with the synagogue, but I never did. And so we came together. We were Jewish. We knew we were Jewish. We had a Jewish ceremony for wedding. And so we're Jewish. No big deal. You know, we don't do Shabbat. We don't even do the High Holy Day. We don't do any of that, but we're Jewish.
It's not, it is, none of it is required. It's none of it is required.
We become parents, Jessica, and then Lisa. And we made the assumption, Marty, and Randy knew Marty. So when I talk about Marty, he knows exactly who I'm talking about and everything that goes with that name, Marty. Okay, so we had a kid and our assumption was, okay, we're Jewish, so the kid is Jewish, period, end of story. About the time, and Jessica was a really perceptive, sharp kid, and she still is a very perceptive, sharp person. I can't believe I'm saying this, I'm the father of two 50-plus kids now at this point. When Jessica was about in the third or fourth grade, I think this is when this happened, we were in the habit of at night when she went to bed, I would go in and we'd sit and talk for a little bit before she went off to sleep. And one night she started asking me, she's a third grader, right? And she starts asking me all of these questions. And it ranged all the way from why am I different from other kids, to what's the KKK? Whole range of questions. Well, I got to tell you, I crawled out of that room that night. I crawled out of that room. And Marty and I had a talk. Okay, this isn't working. If we want our kids to be Jewish, just us saying we're Jewish, so you're Jewish doesn't do it.
What does it mean?
What do we do?
Yeah, what does that mean, in fact?
Well, it meant being it meant for us that the kid understood what it meant to be Jewish, and being comfortable with that, not uncomfortable with it.
Of course. Now, how do you go about instilling that?
That was the question. So we figured, okay, we were not big on the edifice complex stuff. We really were not into joining a synagogue at that point. And so he said, okay, well. Overkill. We put together, with some like-minded families, we put together an independent group. In Hebrew, it's called a Havarah, friendship circle, basically. And we thought that would, if we came together and celebrated holidays and talked about Jewish, that would be a good way to do it. And it turned out it was terrific for the adults, but the kids were not involved except when we celebrated a holiday. We actually did put together for one of the kids our own bar mitzvah for one kid, which was a terrific experience, but it wasn't working. So we joined a synagogue, and we joined a synagogue where we got really good vibes. And the kids grew up in that synagogue, and my wife, Marty, she eventually really dove in, and she eventually became the principal of the Torah school there, and a very, very well-respected Jewish educator in San Diego County. But
what did the synagogue have that you were not able to do yourselves, even though you had all the cultural knowledge?
The magic word is a community. And what we realized was, and this was one of my wife's mantras, and she, as a Jewish educator, I was always in awe of her as a people person. The way she interacted with parents of kids, the kids themselves, other adults in different situations where she taught or interacted, her mantra was, in America, which is, even though it's secular, separation of church and state, basically, religiously, America is a Christian country in theme. It's just a Christian country. If you want to be Jewish in America, you need to be part of some kind of a Jewish community. And that's what happened with the girls at the synagogue. And there were two big experiences that were wonderful in terms of the girls and locking them in to being comfortable being Jewish. One was, once a month, there was what we call family Shabbat at the synagogue. And what it meant was, before the service, families would gather in the social hall, bring your own food, potluck, pizza's okay, as long as it's not pepperoni or sausage. And, the Colonel is fine, and a lot of us would bring our own food and share, and with families. It was a family experience. The rabbi and his wife and kids were there, and they led whatever needed to be done. And that really clicked. It really embedded. And then summer camp, a Jewish summer camp, was a big experience for the girls. Sure. And it clicked. And
it's like immersion.
It took. Let's
sure.
put it that way. Jessica is Jewish. Grandson Ethan is Jewish. Eric is totally supportive of that. The Rays and the Lovejoys, as part of the extended family, they are really locked into understanding that. We have a wonderful mutuality about that, understanding our backgrounds. My younger daughter, Lisa, is gone off in a different direction in her life, but she is definitely seeking her comfort level being Jewish. And that's when I realized that's what you need. If you want to be comfortable being Jewish, you need to become part of a Jewish community.
It does transcend religious doctrine. It is a cultural thing. It is a cultural thing.
Hey, and just a couple of thoughts from the Christian / Reformed Jewish side of the equation. No, I'm kidding. But a couple of things from the Christian side that's fascinating to me in listening to the conversation thus far is the separation you're making, Dave, between your Jewishness and your agnosticism. It's an interesting. I've never thought of it quite this way, because as a Christian, I can't really make that same division, because whenever it was that the first person in my family tree became a Christian, they left behind their community-based religious faith, etc. That there was a big conversion from whatever it was that my relatives in the British Isles, whenever it was that they became Christian, when they became Christian. And then the other part of it that's an interesting dynamic is that when Christians think deeply enough about it, the concept is that we were kind of grafted into the Jewish culture's faith. Obviously, it's taken a different turn. I'm not talking about that, but the roots of Christianity are distinctly Jewish. And as a non-Jew, it's, I am grafted into this thing. So it's kind of a different setup. So it's like, if I'm an agnostic, then why would I be a Christian?
Okay.
Because Christian is something different than Jewish is, at least in the conversation we've heard about. And it's just kind of interesting to me. It's just different, just because.
I think there's the connection is, what's the term? The three Abrahamic faiths.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the phrase.
Yep.
They all have the same root. They
Yep.
all have that same connection, and they've gone in different directions in what the God concept is. It's three different directions, basically. But there is a connection because of the one God concept, the Abrahamic, and that's why they're the Abrahamic faiths. But anyway, that
but
is,
I think community.
I see your point. I really
Yeah,
do.
yeah. So to me, being an atheist and a Christian doesn't make sense. Being an agnostic and a Christian doesn't make sense. But primarily, it's because when I say I'm a Christian, I'm talking about my faith. Although it also then becomes part of a community, but it's not a community that goes as deep in my family tree.
You don't wrestle with God.
Well, I would say.
And I'll be a little provocative here. But
There you go. No, because I've always loved the passage with Jacob that you mentioned, because there is a feeling in many churches that it's like, well, when you're a Christian, you shouldn't wrestle anymore. It's like you're done with the wrestling.
Well, Christians want to let God win.
Well, but the thing is, for me, that's not where my Christianity has grown the most. It's actually become deeper when I do wrestle versus when I just swallow whole what other people give me.
Andy, what do you wrestle with? That's if you use the word wrestle,
Sure.
And you're talking as a Christian, what do you mean by the word wrestle here?
Well, I would say there've been different wrestling bouts in my life, different opponents.
Greco-Roman, what are we talking about? Sumo?
That's right.
No nude wrestling here. Please don't say that.
That's right.
No.
But no, like in college, there was a big wrestling match in college when I was a religion major in a school that was definitely agnostic to atheist in the religion department, not to mention the whole school. But at the same time, I was part of a Christian group that I had helped start and lead. But I was also being challenged in a class, interestingly enough, called Theists and Atheists, taught by a professor who was at a super conservative college in undergrad and then went far the other direction in her graduate studies. So we had a great rapport. but there were all sorts of questions that were being thrown at me from deep philosophers and thinkers, and, meeting Nietzsche and Feuerbach, where it's all just a projection. And I didn't have answers to those questions. So there was a struggle there between what I knew was going on in the group with my friends and seeing people's lives get better, but also knowing that I didn't have the philosophical answers to make that make sense.
So what I'm hearing you say in terms of who or what you're wrestling with is, it wasn't a wrestling. The Jewish concept is wrestling with God, wrestling with the God concept. What you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is, you were wrestling with other versions of belief about God.
And justifications for the belief I already had. I would say my struggle with God was it wasn't a struggle, because God won and overpowered me to the point that there wasn't a struggle, because it was when my family fell apart in high school, and then I moved to college, and so I didn't have any of my friends from high school, because I was in high school in London and college in the US, and everybody was scattered, and there was just kind of nothing left in my life. And that was when I decided, okay, this faith that my parents had brought me up in, I'm going to make that the center of my life. So it was almost, rather than being a battle, it was more like, I'm already defeated. Is there anything left I can grab hold of to make any sense out of life? And that's where, and that's where it kind of started. And so there've been different battles. Like when I was living in other countries and saw Christianity done well or horribly, there were struggles with that. Like, how can there be so many charlatans out there, in the Christian world? Or when I was in seminary and I saw so many leaders, suddenly you got kind of the inside knowledge. So you knew more and more of the leaders that looked great on the outside, but had major failings that would show up and cause catastrophe. And so that was another one, was just the struggle with, well, if this is something that's of God, why are there so many people messing this thing up left, right, and center? But I hear you. I mean, I think the dynamic was different, but again, I think part of it goes back to the fact that I though my parents went to church, I had an Anglo-Saxon heritage, right? Well, but that didn't mean much to me, except it was just a historical novelty, because we didn't have anything that we did together as a family that celebrated our Anglo-Saxon heritage, which you may be thankful for, because the only ones I've seen that do that tend toward the neo-fascist and Nazi.
But in essence, it's in terms of a culture, it's not a question of judging it. It's a question of, this is the culture that flowed.
Yeah. But it's just like in my family's life, it was like Christianity was grafted in, and we left England for the United States a few generations back.
Yes.
So the heritage really faded away. And it was just more like, oh, I'm an American. Am I going to be a Christian or not? I don't know. I have to decide that, that sort of thing, which is a different dynamic.
But both of those are really fascinating, because Dave and I come from something that is, as we've discussed, steeped in both. I mean, we are absolutely, and we are prisoners of both in a way.
But that's where, Walker Percy made some mention of this in one of his stories but I think that's one of the things that as an outsider fascinates me about Judaism, is the strength of that identity and cohesion, when the identity and cohesion, when the identity that my heritage had didn't have that strength, because it just kind of went away. It's not still there. I mean, I couldn't get together and, some people are going to Stonehenge to visit and chant some things or something, but I mean, I would never think of doing that. And it's just like, that has nothing to do with who I am, because my cultural background didn't have the staying power that I think the Jewish cultural background can have at times. And I just find that interesting and fascinating.
To a degree, I think why that is because, to a degree, the larger white European culture excluded the Jewish culture.
Sure.
And
sure.
so the Jewish culture was never able to assimilate out all of its individual characteristics.
The Statel ghetto mentality.
Yeah. Well, it was enforced upon us. It's not like we said, hey, we're going to build the walls around where we live and you all keep out.
It was enforced. You're right.
Yeah. So historically, it's ironically, as the three of us sit here having this conversation, a lot of the reason that Dave and I have the depth of connection that we have is because this was, in essence, forced upon us by the larger white culture that our culture trying to navigate.
By the way, related to that,
it's just historical.
Related to that, I don't know if either of you have seen. It's a miniseries. It was a miniseries on TV called Unorthodox. It's a
Oh, great! Yeah, great show.
Great. It was terrific because what it showed was
it was like
the mentality of being in an ultra-Orthodox community and this woman trying to break, how she broke out of it. But my point here is, I was thinking in the connection again with our conversation and in anticipation of this conversation, I was thinking about the ultra-Orthodox communities, their isolationist lifestyle. To the point where it's like almost like 17th century still.
They want to go back to the shtetl.
It really is. But look at it from a different spin. They are protecting, by doing what they do, they're protecting their community and their community values. That's the way their solution is. That's how they protect it, by isolation and very carefully guarded excursions into the secular world.
The series Shtizzle,
but just ratchet up.
The series Shtizzle really, it did a remarkable thing. It made the ultra Orthodox community in Jerusalem understandable.
Right.
And
I have avoided that series, to be honest.
Oh, it's terrific.
I've heard very good things about it. But I've avoided it. I just I don't want to dive into it. I don't want to dive into it.
Let me ask this: do both of you see the Jewish heritage we've been talking about as a benefit, or as you've talked about as a prison, or as both? I mean, I'm just interested in.
Alan, you go first.
Well, all right. I grew up in a suburb of Baltimore in the 60s. And so I was born in 1959. That was 14 years after, 14 years after the camps were liberated.
Okay.
And in my community, my first Hebrew school teacher had a tattoo on her, that had been stuck in her arm. This piece of this connection to each other was built in, and this piece of what it meant to be Jewish was baked into my thinking really early on. So when you ask, is an advantage or a disadvantage, it cuts both ways.
Okay.
It does. Culturally, I'm gonna, all right. And I think, despised as we have been for the reasons, whatever they might be, I think we have not treated the world the way that the world has treated us. We have been rather Jesus-like in our do unto others. And we have done really an awful lot to benefit the rest of the people on this planet with the product of our minds and other things that we do. There's a one, and we've talked about this in other podcasts. There's one of the core Jewish concepts is tikkun olam.
Heal the world, repair the world.
It is every Jew's obligation to make the world a better place just for having been in it. It is the core of do unto others.
Right.
And so, in a way, I think we're kind of the flame keepers of do unto others. ironically enough. So that's how I would, my ever so Jewish, too many words, you're talking with my hands at the same time. Way to answer your question, Randy. Okay, I'm done. Tag, you're it, Dave.
Okay. You've raised an interest, you've reopened something in here by what you said about your upbringing. I was born in 1940. And so when the war ended, I was 6 years old. And I remember as a kid in the Bronx, the entire elementary school one day was taken on a field trip to a local movie theater. And guess what they showed the entire school? The filming of what the soldiers found in the camps when they were liberated. And that seared into my head. And this is part of who I am, you know, and that was another chip that embedded in terms of what it means to be Jewish. And you know, I didn't have any family that was lost in the Holocaust. I had no family that was lost in the Holocaust, so I did not have any direct connection to that.
Same here.
But it's part of being Jewish, understanding that this is what happened, and that's kind of sort of a background, another background explanation for why it's so important, I think, in a place like America, for Jews, if they wish to maintain a Jewish identity, that they have to come together somehow in community. And that, you know, our Marty and I, my parental attitude, we're Jews, so my kids are Jewish, doesn't work. You need something much more than that. And that's
true.
why, and in the US,
it is true.
At basic community, where do you find it? Much so we don't like the Oedipus complex story. Where do you find it? Where do you find that? And you find it at the synagogue. Now, I will add to that millennials, I don't know what the current status is, but for the last 10, 15 years at least, millennials have come upon a different way of approaching it. There are a lot of millennials who are Jewish who they don't like the edifice complex idea. They do not want to connect to an established synagogue situation because of everything, you know, the synagogue with the swimming
pool, they're so Jesus-y that way.
With the bowling alley, you know, all of that kind of stuff. You know, a bar mitzvahs that cost the family what some people take a year to earn, you know, that kind of garbage. So what the millennials did was, and you know, in the day of internet and social networking, they formed what's the term? Affinity groups. And they would create events.
Another form of community.
They would create Jewish events, and they would all connect by social networking. Okay, show up at 7 o'clock at, and they would do a Jewish event. Where's the synagogue? Where's the rabbi? Not anywhere in sight, but it's a Jewish connection, a Jewish community that they formed. And there is a certain reflection of that in some aspects of the Jewish movement in America. There are some rabbis that have set up congregations where that kind of fresh approach happens. There's the whole Jewish renewal movement that started about 20, 25 years ago to freshen things up. But still, the important point is somehow maintain, create a community of like-minded Jews. And that's the way to preserve identity as Jewish.
Now, to bring our conversation around to a close, to an agnostic kind of a close, I'm going to flip this on Randy. And you kind of started in this direction, but as you hear about, you know, people bound in this way, what happens inside your head? What goes through your mind? Does this in any way sound appealing? The most unappealing thing on the planet? What if suddenly we're Randy? I just got some genetic testing back, and Everyone's been lying to you your whole life. Your real name is Mordecai. How do you feel, Randy? How do you feel?
I think honestly, part of me is a bit jealous of the depth of identity you have. Granted, that's a bit naive to say, given how it was forged, because it was painfully forged. But, the concept of me being white European is kind of like cold malto meal without any sugar or butter. It's just, it does nothing for me. It in no way lights up any part of me to think that I'm white European. That means nothing. It has no meaning for me. And so to have this tradition with specific things that you can gather around is something that speaks to a part of me that is pretty dormant otherwise. And then on top of that, really my Christianity just makes that worse because, as far as I can tell, there isn't a white European that had anything to do with writing any part of the text that I live my life by. None of it. It is all, almost all, if not completely, probably completely, written by Jewish people. And so, again, it's like there's a fascination, which is another reason why the way Christians have treated Jews, it's like this weird psychosis that makes absolutely no sense, because you're saying, we worship this Jewish guy, but you Jewish people are terrible. It's like, it makes no sense to me at all.
Sometimes the kids just turn out rotten, the kids, and they turn on the parents, and oh my God.
It's just bizarre to me because it makes absolutely no sense. So my take on it is, I find it very intriguing, the different types of things that Dave and Jessica have invited me to be a part of intrigue me because there's something there that my heritage has no way to provide for me, that is deep and is meaningful, or has potential to be meaningful. But I also understand, that if I figured out, oh, my name's actually Mordecai and my family and, my parents adopted me and I would then have to grapple with Nazi Germany, say, in a way that I haven't had to right now. I can do it from a distance and I can say that's horrible. And I can be totally embarrassed when I hear about the churches that went in line with that whole thing. And I can try to raise up the minority of pastors and churches that stood against Hitler in Germany. But other than that, I can't really do anything else. But if that was my heritage, then I would then be forced to dive more deeply into it, as it sounds like both of you have had to do. But
Randy,
again,
Randy's awareness of that,
sure,
is 90% of the game.
Oh gosh, yes.
And being to articulate it the way you articulated is 90% of the game here.
You are wrestling with God, Randy. You are wrestling with God. You are absolutely doing it, my friend. That's simply a fact. You and that makes you an honorable Jew. I mean, an honorary Jew. An honorary Jew. Sorry.
I love it. Okay.
I'll have the papers drawn up.
Well, I've heard that there was, at least at some point somewhere in Israel, there was like a place where they planted trees for the Gentiles that did significantly step up to hide Jewish people and children from the whole Nazi terror. And I've always thought those are the people, at least, that I can look up to, are the white Europeans who stood up in the face of situations where they could have easily just done nothing and moved on with their life.
Schindler's List. It's Schindler's List.
Yeah.
In somewhere in Jerusalem, I forget where, there is a garden. I think it's called the Garden of the Righteous or something like that.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Which is where the end of Schindler's List
recognizes the non-Jews who were able to help during the Holocaust. So it's totally understandable.
There's this makes me weep. The end of Schindler's List kills me.
Yeah, understood.
As they place a rock on his memorial.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes.
Yeah,
sure.
It speaks of eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives
Kills me.
hope. It gives hope that deep down in most people there is buried good. There is buried some good.
And on that bombshell,
We made Alan weep. We made Alan weep.
I'm such a soft touch. That's
Well,
my deep, dark, dirty secret now. And now I gotta kill you all because you know it.
Well, that was our goal. Dave and I had talked before, and we said, okay, our goal is to make Alan weep. And so, high five virtually, Dave.
I think of that movie and it just
Oh, man. I mean, that's mind-blowingly powerful. It is.
Anyway, we could go on and on and on. Well, Dave and I could go on and on just because we're Jewish, and that's what Jewish, especially older cockers like us do.
But you know what? Here's my crazy idea. What if we got Dave and Walter and we just did an all-out science go nuts?
Oh my gosh!
What do you think? Could that work? I mean,
it's an interesting possibility. Yeah.
But at the very least, we ought to get Dave in, and we just focus on that little tidbit he left us there, the science side.
We have but scratched the surface with Dave, with Walter.
We barely mentioned the word agnostic or atheist in this whole.
That's true. That's true. We may have to retitle it something about wrestling with God. I think that might be a good
which is the nature of agnosticism. So there we are.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us today, Dave, and thank you everyone for
great
listening
to have
in.
everybody. Thanks, Dave.
We will see you all next time.
Take care.